The office was unusually quiet that afternoon. The sun was slipping behind the tall glass buildings, and the CEO, known for her strict demeanor and sharp mind, sat alone at her large mahogany desk. She had spent the day in back-to-back meetings, signing contracts, and answering calls from investors, yet something about today felt different. The usual hum of her assistant's phone and the clicking of keyboards from the open-plan office downstairs seemed distant. She was about to wrap up when a commotion echoed from the lobby. A small, hurried voice cut through the silence, drawing her attention. She frowned slightly, her professional instincts immediately alert. A little girl, no older than 5, darted past security, her small feet clattering against the marble floor. The child's tiny arms were stretched wide as she ran directly toward the CEO. For a moment, everyone froze, unsure of what to do. Security moved forward, but the girl's speed and determination were unexpected. In one swift motion, she threw her arms around the CEO's legs and squeezed tightly. The room fell silent, and all eyes followed the sudden intrusion. The CEO bent slightly, tried to maintain her composure, her mind racing to understand what was happening. The child looked up with bright, innocent eyes and said a single word that seemed to hang in the air. "Mommy." The CEO blinked. The word seemed impossible, out of place. Her first reaction was confusion. She gently removed the little arms wrapped around her, crouching slightly so her face was level with the child's. "Who is your mommy?" she asked softly, keeping her voice calm, professional, but tinged with curiosity. The girl looked up again, her eyes wide but unwavering. She repeated the word, this time louder and clearer. "Mommy." The CEO glanced around the lobby, scanning the crowd of employees and their families who were gathered for the small company family event. Parents and children mingled, chatting softly, enjoying snacks and drinks, but now all attention was drawn to this moment. Everyone watched in silence, unsure how to react. The CEO felt a small, unusual pang of emotion, but she pushed it down, reminding herself to stay composed. From the back of the lobby, a man stepped forward. He was in his mid-30s, dressed neatly in business casual attire, and looked more nervous than usual. This was one of her senior managers, someone she respected for his diligence and integrity. But right now, he looked embarrassed and unsure of how to explain what had just happened. "Is she your daughter?" the CEO asked him calmly, though the word daughter made her heart skip a beat. He swallowed hard and shook his head. "No," he said quietly, his eyes avoiding hers. She's not mine. I mean, she is my daughter, but she just..." His voice trailed off. The CEO raised an eyebrow, signaling him to continue. He hesitated, searching for words that would make sense in this strange and delicate situation. "Her mother passed away 2 years ago," he began slowly. "Since then she's been lonely. She doesn't talk much. She doesn't smile much. But recently she started noticing you. She saw a picture of you in a company magazine, and she started asking about you." The CEO's brow furrowed. She was used to being noticed, to being recognized for her work, but never like this. This was different. This was personal, in a way she wasn't accustomed to. She said that you look like Mommy," he continued, his voice catching slightly. "At first, I thought it was just a child imagining things, but then she started drawing pictures. She draws you with her and me together. She smiles when she sees your photos. She started calling you Mommy, even though I never told her to. I didn't encourage it, I swear, but she seems happy when she says it." The CEO felt a strange, unfamiliar tug in her chest. She was used to controlling situations, managing crises, making calculated decisions, but this was different. This wasn't about business strategy or corporate leadership. This was about a little girl's heart, something fragile and real that didn't come with instructions or rules. The girl looked up at her again, her small face filled with hope and innocence. She didn't understand the complications of adult life, the grief that surrounded her, or the professional walls that people built. She only knew that this woman, with sharp eyes and a calm voice, made her feel safe. The CEO knelt slightly, lowering herself to the child's level. She placed a gentle hand on the girl's shoulder. "Why do you call me Mommy?" she asked softly, her voice almost a whisper. It wasn't a command nor a question out of obligation. It was a genuine attempt to understand, to connect with something pure and simple. The little girl's eyes shone as she looked up, her small hands clutching a drawing she had made. The drawing was simple, childish, but it depicted three figures: the father, the little girl, and the CEO. Above it, in large, uneven letters, she had written, "My happy family." The words hung in the air. The CEO felt a sudden rush of emotion she didn't expect. Shock, confusion, and a strange warmth that seemed to grow in her chest. She had always prided herself on her composure, her ability to manage people and situations, but right now, she felt exposed, vulnerable in a way she hadn't felt in years. The manager stepped closer, his eyes wide with apology and concern. I didn't expect this to happen. She's been through so much, and I thought maybe she just needed someone to feel close to. I didn't want to cause any trouble. The CEO shook her head slightly, a small, soft smile forming on her lips. "No trouble," she said gently. "I just want to understand. That's all." For a few moments, the room was silent except for the soft hum of air conditioning and the distant sounds of the city outside. The little girl clutched her drawing tightly, waiting. The CEO looked at her, then at the manager, and then back at the child. She realized that this moment was not about business, not about power or control. It was about a little girl's longing for comfort, for connection, for someone who would see her, even for just a moment. Finally, the little girl spoke again, her voice soft but firm. "Because when I look at you, I don't feel lonely." The CEO's heart skipped. She felt something she hadn't allowed herself to feel in years: empathy, warmth, and a sense of responsibility. She reached out and gently took the drawing from the child's hands, studying it carefully. The innocence and honesty captured in the simple lines struck her deeply. The manager watched, his expression a mixture of relief and awe. He had feared that this encounter would be awkward or that the CEO would react harshly, but instead, she was present. She was seeing the child. She was acknowledging the little girl's feelings without judgment, without skepticism, without the filters that adults often put up around emotions. The CEO looked down at the girl and said softly, "You made this for me?" The child nodded enthusiastically, her eyes bright. "Yes, for you, Mommy." The CEO felt a lump in her throat. She swallowed hard, forcing herself to stay composed. "Thank you," she said quietly. "It's very beautiful." The manager stepped back, giving them space. He didn't speak, understanding that this was a moment the CEO needed to process on her own. The little girl clung to the memory of her mother's love, finding it reflected in someone she had never met before. The CEO, in turn, felt a strange stirring in her own life, a reminder that there were things more important than work, more important than power, more important than control. In that quiet, sunlit lobby, surrounded by people who were witnessing but not interfering, an unspoken connection formed between three lives. It was fragile, tentative, but real. And for the CEO, who had spent years building walls around herself, it was a moment that she would never forget. As the little girl finally released her hold and the manager took her hand, the CEO remained kneeling for a few more moments, staring at the drawing in her hands. She realized that the world she had built for herself, with its schedules, meetings, and endless responsibilities, had little room for genuine human connection. Yet here, in the simplicity of a child's love and trust, she found something that no amount of business success could ever provide. That afternoon, nothing else seemed to matter. The files on her desk, the emails in her inbox, the contracts waiting for her signature, all of it faded into the background. What remained was a small girl, a drawing, and a question that would stay with her long after the office lights dimmed and the city's streets grew quiet. Why does your daughter call me Mommy? And more importantly, what could she do with this fragile, unexpected gift of trust that had been placed in her hands? After the incident in the lobby, the CEO couldn't stop thinking about the little girl and her words. The phrase, "I don't feel lonely," echoed in her mind. She was used to handling crises, making tough decisions and solving problems, but this was different. This was not a business problem. This was life itself, fragile, emotional, and unpredictable. The manager, meanwhile, tried to explain more about the little girl's life. He told her about the past 2 years, the long months after his wife passed away, The little girl had withdrawn into herself, refusing to play with other children, refusing to smile. She was quiet, often lost in her thoughts, staring out of windows as if searching for something she could not name. The father did everything he could to comfort her, but nothing seemed to reach her. One evening, while working late at home, the father had been sitting at his desk, glancing at his laptop, when he noticed his daughter drawing at the small table in the corner. She had a set of colored pencils and a notebook. She drew a woman with sharp eyes and confident posture, a woman she had seen in a magazine, the CEO. The father watched silently, unsure how to react. At first, he thought it was just a child imagination, but the girl started smiling, genuinely smiling, something he hadn't seen in months. He decided not to interfere. He didn't want to confuse her, didn't want to encourage a fantasy. Yet he also didn't want to discourage the happiness he saw in her eyes. She asked questions about the CEO, about her work, her life, even her favorite colors and food. She began comparing herself to the little girl in the magazine photos. She was curious, intrigued, and for the first time in a long time, she seemed alive. The manager told the CEO that it had started slowly. She would ask him about the CEO's schedule, watch videos, and sometimes even sing songs she imagined the CEO might like. The father tried to redirect her, suggesting other things, but she would always return to the images and the thought of the woman she had chosen to call Mommy. Eventually, she began calling the CEO that name, softly at first, and then more often, especially when she wanted comfort or when she felt scared or sad. The father was shocked, unsure what to do, but he realized the child had found something comforting, something that healed a small part of her broken heart. The CEO listened quietly, her fingers resting on the edge of her desk. She had heard many stories in her life, about hardship, about loss, about people struggling to cope with tragedy. But she had never experienced anything like this firsthand. She had never been chosen by someone so innocent to be a source of comfort. She felt the weight of responsibility settle on her shoulders, and with it came a strange mixture of fear and curiosity. She asked questions, wanting to understand more. How had the little girl discovered the magazine? Why did she feel such a connection? How did the father cope with this unusual situation? The manager explained patiently, telling her that the child attachment was not meant to replace anyone, not meant to confuse her or him. It was a need for emotional security, a way for the child to feel safe again after the enormous loss she had endured. She had been missing her mother deeply, and in the CEO, she had found someone who represented kindness, strength, and stability. The CEO thought about her own life. She had sacrificed a lot to build her company. Long hours, endless meetings, and constant pressure had left little room for personal connections. She had never married, never had children, and while she often told herself that she was content, deep down there was a quiet emptiness she rarely acknowledged. She realized now that the little girl's words had stirred something buried within her, something she hadn't felt in years, the desire to be needed, to be trusted, to matter in someone's life in a personal way. The manager shared more stories about the girl's behavior at home, how she would sometimes sit quietly by the window, staring at the sky and whisper, "Mommy, come back," as if hoping for a miracle. How she would ask to hear stories about strong women who made a difference, about people who were brave and kind. How she had started creating little gifts, drawings, and notes that she hoped would reach someone who could understand her feelings. The father had kept these things safe, storing them in a box in her room, watching her grow slowly, step by step, out of the darkness of grief. The CEO felt a lump in her throat. She realized that she had been focusing on achievements, on power, and on the endless demands of her company, but she had never considered what it meant to provide comfort, safety, and presence for someone who needed it completely and unconditionally. She had spent years building walls around herself, thinking that emotional vulnerability was a weakness, but now she saw that real strength could be shown in gentle ways, in listening, in caring, in simply being there. The manager, noticing the change in her expression, added quietly, "She doesn't understand fully what she's doing. She's just a child. But she needed something, someone to hold on to. And somehow she found that in you." The CEO looked down at the drawing the little girl had made, the simple lines capturing a warmth and affection that words could not express. She realized that this was more than admiration. This was trust. This was a child reaching out to heal her own heart through the presence of another human being. She had been chosen, not by accident, but by instinct, by need, by love. She thought about how fragile life could be, how easily people could be broken by loss and loneliness, how children, in particular, needed stability and care to grow into strong, happy individuals. And she felt a sense of purpose she hadn't felt in a long time. She wanted to help. She wanted to ensure that this little girl felt safe and loved, even if only in the small ways she could provide. The manager, seeing her thoughtful expression, suggested gently, "If you want, you could meet her sometimes, just occasionally in a proper setting. She won't expect you to replace her mother. She just needs someone to be there, someone to care." The CEO nodded slowly. She understood the delicacy of the situation. She knew boundaries were important. She knew the child's father must remain the central figure in her life. But she also recognized that her presence, even minimal, could bring comfort, hope, and perhaps a small bit of healing. That evening, after leaving the office, the CEO found herself thinking about the little girl repeatedly. She couldn't focus on the usual evening routine. She couldn't stop picturing the child's hopeful eyes, the soft voice saying, "Mommy," and the tiny hands holding out a drawing filled with love and trust. She realized she had been living in a bubble of business success, unaware of the emotional connections that truly mattered. She understood now that sometimes human lives intersect in unexpected ways, bringing meaning that no contract, no achievement, no recognition could provide. The next day, she took a moment before the morning meetings to reflect. She thought about what it meant to be a source of comfort, about the quiet power of simply being present. She considered how she could balance her demanding career with the opportunity to help this child. She realized that being involved didn't mean overstepping boundaries. It didn't mean becoming a parent or replacing anyone. It simply meant showing care, consistency, and presence. The manager noticed a reflection on this and felt a mixture of relief and gratitude. He had feared that this unusual situation might cause complications. But now, he saw the CEO's willingness to understand and participate in a way that respected both the child and himself. He could see that she was human, capable of empathy and kindness, not just leadership and authority. Over the next few weeks, small steps were taken. The little girl continued to draw and write, occasionally showing her father pictures of the CEO, asking questions about her work, her day, and her life. The father guided her carefully, never forcing explanations, never discouraging her curiosity. The CEO, in turn, allowed herself to occasionally send small notes or gifts, always in a way that respected boundaries. She became a quiet presence in the child's life, someone steady, trustworthy, and safe. Slowly, the little girl began to open up more. She laughed more, asked more questions, and seemed to feel lighter in spirit. She still missed her mother deeply, but now she had an additional source of emotional support. The father noticed a change in her demeanor. She was happier, more curious, and more willing to engage with the world around her. And the CEO noticed something in herself, too. She smiled more, left the office earlier on occasion, and began to see life beyond meetings and contracts. She discovered that by giving a little of herself, she gained something she hadn't realized she was missing, a connection that was real, human, and profoundly moving. Through this experience, she learned that family was not always defined by blood. Sometimes it was about trust, presence, and the willingness to care. Sometimes it was about being there when someone needed it most, even if just in small ways. And sometimes it was about allowing a little child to heal, while quietly healing something inside oneself too. Weeks passed, and the small connection between the little girl and the CEO grew quietly but steadily. The child had begun to trust that someone outside her immediate family could care about her without judgment or expectations. The CEO, in turn, started noticing changes in herself. She had always been driven, organized, and focused on results. But now, her mind often wandered to the small hands that held a drawing and the tiny voice that had called her mommy. She realized that her life had been full of accomplishments, yet missing something essential, genuine emotional connection. The little girl's father noticed the subtle changes too. His daughter smiled more at home, laughed during meals, and started sharing stories about her day. She would talk about the CEO in innocent ways, asking if she was busy, what she liked to eat, or she had smiled that day. It was clear that having a supportive figure outside the family was giving her a sense of stability she had not had in 2 long years. The CEO began participating in small ways, always careful not to overstep. She sent little notes to the child through her father, thanking her for drawings, praising her for effort in schoolwork, or simply sending words of encouragement. She didn't rush to define her role or take the place of the mother she had never known. She simply showed presence. The child learned that trust could be placed in unexpected places, that adults could care without conditions, and that life would offer kindness in the form of gestures and attention that were gentle yet powerful. One afternoon, the CEO received a letter through the office mail. The little girl had written herself in large, uneven letters. It was full of questions, drawings, and little stories about her day. The CEO read it carefully, noticing the effort and thought behind every word. There was no pretense, no request for something beyond the child's ability. It was pure communication from a heart that had learned to trust. She felt tears prick her eyes, something she seldom allowed herself to experience. She realized that human connection was more than meetings, contracts, or strategies. It was about being seen, being heard, and being valued. The CEO began to think differently about her own life. She reflected on how much of her time had been dedicated to work, to climbing the corporate ladder, and to achieving goals that, while impressive, did not fulfill her emotionally. She realized she had neglected the parts of life that were subtle but significant: companionship, warmth, and empathy. Through the little girl's innocent gestures, she was learning that fulfillment could come from offering support, comfort, and care to those who needed it. At home, the father observed the growing changes in his daughter. She spoke about the CEO with admiration, but also with a clear understanding that she was not her mother. The child was beginning to grasp boundaries, learning that love and trust could exist in multiple forms. The father felt immense gratitude toward the CEO. He realized that she had stepped into their lives not to replace anyone, but to provide the child with a stable, nurturing presence. He had feared that this unusual relationship might complicate things, but instead, it brought joy and healing. The CEO decided to take another step. During a company family event, she asked if she could read a story to the children present. She was nervous. Speaking to adults came naturally, but reading to children required a different kind of presence. She chose a gentle story about courage and kindness, her voice soft but steady. The little girl listened intently, eyes wide, holding onto her father's hand. Others in the room watched, noticing the calm, patient way the CEO engaged with the children. It was a rare glimpse of the woman behind the executive title, someone capable of empathy, warmth, and gentle leadership. After the story, the little girl approached her with a drawing she had made. This one depicted a tree, under which the child, her father, and the CEO were sitting together, smiling. Above it, she had written, "I am happy with you here." The CEO felt her composure falter for a moment. She looked at the drawing, then at the child, and finally at the father. There was no need for words. The message was clear. The child was expressing gratitude and trust in the purest way possible. That evening, the CEO reflected on what she had learned. She realized that strength was not just in decision-making or authority, but in empathy, presence, and patience. She began thinking about how she could continue to support the child, the father, and other children in need, not through grand gestures, but through consistent, meaningful actions. The experience taught her that true leadership involved nurturing, understanding, and listening, not only in the boardroom but in life itself. In the weeks that followed, the child began to open up more. She spoke about her mother, sharing memories and feelings she had kept locked inside. She laughed freely, sometimes hugging her father tightly, sometimes running to show the CEO a new drawing or a small accomplishment at school. The CEO continued to respond with encouragement, always respectful of boundaries, always patient. The child's trust grew, and with it, a sense of healing began to unfold. The little girl was slowly learning that grief did not have to be carried alone, that there were people who could offer support and love in different ways. The CEO noticed a subtle change in herself, too. She began spending more time reflecting on her personal life, thinking about relationships she had neglected, and considering how she could foster meaningful connections beyond the office. She realized that being a mentor, a guide, or even a supportive presence for someone did not diminish her professionalism or authority. Instead, it enriched her life and perspective. She began to smile more naturally, pause to appreciate moments, and value the simple joys of human interaction. The child's father observed these changes with quiet gratitude. He saw how the CEO's presence, though carefully measured, brought light into their lives. His daughter's happiness grew, and he felt reassured that she had someone to trust beyond their small family unit. He began to understand that family could extend beyond traditional boundaries, that love and care could take many forms. The child learned resilience, trust, and the ability to accept help and kindness from others, lessons that would stay with her long after childhood. As time passed, the CEO continued her involvement in small, thoughtful ways. She sent encouraging notes, visited during company events, and read stories occasionally. She never forced interaction, but allowed the child to seek her presence naturally. This approach helped the child develop a sense of security and emotional stability. She began to see that she could express her feelings, seek comfort, and trust adults without fear. The CEO had become a quiet, reliable figure in her life, a symbol of kindness, patience, and understanding. The CEO also learned about the importance of boundaries and respect. She realized that being present did not mean overstepping or replacing anyone. She carefully maintained a balance, allowing the child and father to remain at the center of their family, while providing support from the side. This approach allowed trust and connection to grow organically, without pressure or expectation. The CEO discovered that emotional intelligence, empathy, and patience were powerful tools, capable of nurturing not just professional relationships, but deeply human ones as well. The little girl continued to draw, write, and share her thoughts. She learned to express grief, joy, curiosity, and admiration in constructive ways. She laughed more freely, asked questions, and began to embrace life again with a sense of hope and trust. The CEO's presence, though gentle and unobtrusive, became a steady source of reassurance. Through this experience, the child discovered that life offers safety, love, and stability even in the wake of loss. The CEO, in turn, discovered the profound impact that small, thoughtful actions can have on a life, and fulfillment that comes from caring for others in meaningful ways. The CEO began to notice small, meaningful changes in her life outside the office. She walked through the city streets differently, taking note of children playing in parks, parents laughing with their kids, and the small acts of kindness that often went unnoticed. She realized that her perception of the world had shifted. It was no longer just about meetings, deadlines, or profits. Life had become more personal, more connected, more real. Meanwhile, the little girl continued to flourish. Her curiosity had grown, and she often asked questions about the CEO's daily life, about what it meant to be a leader, and about how she balanced work and personal life. The father encouraged her interest, explaining that the CEO had worked hard to achieve her success. He watched carefully, knowing the child needed guidance, but also freedom to explore her thoughts and feelings. It was a delicate balance, but one that allowed the child to grow while learning to trust in a healthy way. The CEO began planning small, thoughtful gestures to maintain a connection with the little girl. She sent handwritten notes occasionally, not daily, but enough to let the child know she was remembered. Sometimes she sent small books or educational games that encouraged creativity and learning. She never sent lavish gifts or tried to overstep. Her presence was steady, gentle, and consistent. Through these simple actions, the little girl learned the importance of trust, patience, and the quiet power of caring without expectation. One day, the CEO decided to take a step further. She wanted to ensure that the child had positive experiences with people beyond her father. She asked the manager if it would be possible to invite the little girl to participate in a company family day. The event was casual and friendly, filled with games, storytelling, and interactive activities. She wanted the child to feel a sense of community, to see that there were safe and supportive adults in the world who cared about her. The father agreed cautiously, worried about overstimulation or disappointment. The CEO reassured him that the experience would be positive, emphasizing that the goal was simply for the child to feel joy and connection. When the day arrived, the little girl ran into the activity area with excitement, holding her father's hand. She noticed the CEO among the other adults and smiled. There was no confusion or pressure, only recognition and comfort. The child ran to the CEO, showing her a new drawing she had made, depicting the two of them holding hands under a bright sun. The CEO knelt down to her level, complimenting her creativity and praising her effort. The child beamed, feeling seen and valued. As the weeks went by, the CEO and the little girl's bond grew in subtle, meaningful ways. They exchanged letters, shared stories, and the CEO occasionally read bedtime stories over video calls. The little girl's father continued to supervise these interactions carefully, ensuring that boundaries were respected. The child learned that adults could provide guidance, warmth, and comfort without replacing her family or her memories of her mother. She began to understand that love and trust could take many forms, and that it was possible to receive care from more than one person. The CEO reflected on the experience and recognized her own growth. She had always believed that success meant authority, recognition, and financial achievement. But she discovered that true fulfillment came from emotional connection, from making a positive impact in someone's life. She realized that by nurturing the small, fragile heart, she was rediscovering her own humanity, empathy, and capacity for deep, meaningful relationships. It was a lesson that no boardroom meeting, business strategy, or financial gain could teach. The little girl's development was remarkable. She began to express her emotions more freely, laughed openly, and shared her thoughts without hesitation. She learned resilience, empathy, and the importance of trust. Her father watched her grow with a mixture of relief and pride, knowing that his daughter was slowly learning to navigate life with confidence and security. He understood that the CEO's presence, though not constant, provided a steady source of support that complemented his own love and guidance. One afternoon, the child surprised both the CEO and her father by writing a letter. In her letter, she expressed her gratitude for the guidance, care, and presence that had entered her life. She acknowledged the role her father had always played and emphasized that the CEO's involvement had been comforting and positive. She wrote about feeling safe, valued, and happy. Reading the letter, the CEO felt a lump in her throat. She realized that her small gestures had created a meaningful impact, and that her involvement had helped shape the child's understanding of love, trust, and emotional security. The CEO also learned the importance of consistency. She understood that fleeting attention or sporadic involvement could be confusing for a child who had experienced loss. By maintaining a steady, thoughtful presence, she helped the little girl develop a sense of stability. This consistency reinforced trust and allowed the child to gradually open her heart, knowing that there were adults she could rely on without fear or misunderstanding. The CEO found satisfaction in the small victories: a smile, a laugh, a drawing sent with excitement, or a story shared during a video call. Over time, the CEO noticed subtle changes in her professional life as well. She became more patient with her employees, more considerate of their well-being, and more attentive to the emotional dynamics within her company. She realized that leadership was not just about decision-making and strategy, but also about understanding people, nurturing growth, and creating environments where individuals felt valued and supported. Her experience with the little girl had opened her eyes to the broader implications of empathy and human connection, both at home and in the workplace. The little girl continued to thrive. She explored new interests, participated in school activities, and began forming friendships with other children. She had developed confidence and a sense of security that allowed her to embrace life more fully. The father observed her growth with pride, recognizing that the combination of his care and the CEO's thoughtful involvement had created a safe space for the child to heal and flourish. Through this ongoing journey, the CEO realized that helping a child did not mean overstepping boundaries or assuming a parental role. It meant offering steady, caring support, encouraging growth, and providing comfort in a way that respected the child's family and personal history. She discovered the power of presence, patience, and empathy, and learned that these qualities could create lasting, meaningful connections. The little girl began to understand more about the nature of relationships. She learned that love could be gentle and steady, that trust could be built gradually, and that adults could provide guidance without replacing the people she had lost. She expressed gratitude for stability and kindness she had received, and through her interactions with the CEO, she developed a sense of hope, confidence, and resilience. The CEO, in turn, reflected on her own life and the impact she could have on others. She realized that leadership and care were not mutually exclusive. By nurturing the little girl, she had discovered a new dimension of her own humanity, one that was capable of deep empathy, patience, and understanding. She recognized that the lessons she had learned through this experience could influence her professional life as well, making her a more compassionate and perceptive leader. As the months passed, the relationship between the CEO and the little girl remained steady and meaningful. They continued to exchange letters, drawings, and small gestures of care. The child's father remained an integral part of this dynamic, ensuring that the child's well-being was always prioritized. Together, they created an environment where the child could heal, grow, and thrive, while the CEO experienced a profound sense of fulfillment and connection. The CEO realized that her life had changed in subtle but significant ways. She had learned the importance of emotional connection, the value of presence, and the impact of small, thoughtful gestures. She understood that life was richer when shared with others, and that even brief interactions could create lasting, positive effects. Through this experience, she discovered profound rewards of caring, nurturing, and supporting others, and she began to embrace these qualities in all aspects of her life. In the quiet moments, when she reflected on the journey, the CEO understood that true fulfillment came not from accomplishments, accolades, or authority, but from the connections forged, the trust earned, and the lives touched. She had become a source of stability, comfort, and encouragement for a little girl who had experienced loss. And in doing so, she had found a new sense of purpose, meaning, and joy. The little girl's progress continued steadily, and with it, a new sense of balance began to form in the CEO's life. The child no longer clung desperately or asked repeatedly why she called her mommy. She had begun to understand the difference between love, care, and parental connection. At the same time, she appreciated the consistent, gentle presence the CEO had provided in her life. Her drawings became more imaginative, full of colors, scenes of happiness, and reflections of her growing confidence. Each drawing was a story, a reflection of her feelings, and often included the CEO in some way, always respectfully, always thoughtfully. The CEO watched these developments with quiet pride and humility. She had never considered herself a maternal figure, and yet she realized that she could have a meaningful impact in a child's life. She began to notice how much she had been missing in her own personal life: laughter, playful curiosity, simple trust, and the comfort of being needed. She started incorporating these realizations into her daily life, finding joy in small moments, in conversations, in the small victories that children naturally create when they feel safe and supported. One afternoon, during another company family event, the CEO decided to sit with a child and read a story in front of the group. The little girl's eyes lit up as she watched her favorite adult prepare to share a tale. It was a simple story, but the CEO read with emotion, adding voices and expressions that held the attention of all the children. The little girl clutched the CEO's hand briefly, and the room seemed to pause in recognition of this quiet, tender connection. When the story was finished, the child ran to show her a drawing of the story's characters, proudly displaying her creativity. The CEO praised her sincerely, complimenting the effort and imagination. Later, the child's father approached quietly. He thanked the CEO for taking the time to be part of these small moments. He expressed gratitude for her respect, her patience, and the subtle ways she contributed to his daughter's healing. The CEO listened, understanding fully that the impact of her actions could not always be measured in words. She had contributed to stability, joy, and trust, and in doing so, had fostered resilience in a small but significant human being. Over the following months, the child grew in confidence and social skills. She began sharing her thoughts more freely, engaging with peers at school, and exploring new hobbies. She asked questions, shared stories, and expressed herself in ways that showed she had internalized lessons of trust, patience, and empathy. She still missed her mother, but now she had a broader understanding of human connections and the capacity to accept care from others. The father noticed these changes and felt relief and pride. His daughter was no longer a child living in shadows of grief, but a bright presence, open to life and relationships. The CEO also reflected on her journey. She realized that her involvement had taught her lessons she could not have learned in boardrooms or business meetings. She learned that true leadership was not only about authority, decisions, and strategy, but also about nurturing, understanding, and offering presence. She discovered that emotional intelligence, empathy, and patience were essential tools for leading both in life and work. The experience had reshaped her view of what it meant to make a difference, emphasizing quality, intention, and care rather than scale or recognition. As the relationship matured, the child stopped referring to the CEO as Mommy. Instead, she called her by name or occasionally used a playful nickname. The transition was natural, gentle, and reflected the child's growing understanding of relationships. She had learned that bonds could be strong, meaningful, and loving without confusing roles or replacing family. The CEO accepted this change with quiet satisfaction, knowing that her efforts had helped the child heal and grow, and that their connection had become one of respect, trust, and affection. The father continued to supervise these interactions, always mindful of the child's well-being. He had witnessed her growth and realized that the CEO's steady involvement had played a crucial role in helping his daughter regain confidence and emotional stability. He understood that care could come from different directions, and that trust and love could coexist without diminishing family bonds. He felt gratitude, peace, and a renewed sense of hope for the future. One day, the little girl approached the CEO with a final, special gift. She had made a drawing of herself, her father, and the CEO standing together under a bright sun, smiling and happy. At the top, in large, colorful letters, she had written, "Thank you for being here." The CEO felt her composure break slightly, tears welling in her eyes. She realized that this simple act, this expression of gratitude, encapsulated everything that had occurred over the past months. It represented trust, love, healing, and connection, and it showed that even small gestures could create profound impacts. The CEO knelt down, holding the drawing carefully. She looked at the child and whispered, "Thank you. This is beautiful. I am proud of you." The little girl beamed, knowing that her words and her art had been understood and appreciated. The father watched silently, deeply moved by the scene, realizing that his daughter had regained a sense of safety and joy that he had feared lost forever. The experience had transformed the CEO in unexpected ways. She had learned the importance of empathy, patience, and presence. She had discovered that fulfillment was not limited to professional achievement, but could be found in meaningful human connections. She began incorporating these lessons into her life, being more attentive to her colleagues, employees, and personal relationships. She smiled more easily, paused to enjoy moments, and valued emotional bonds as much as professional success. The little girl continued to grow, navigating life with increased confidence, resilience, and trust. She learned that emotional support could be found in multiple ways and from multiple sources, and that love could exist without replacing the people she had lost. The father watched her thrive, proud of the progress she had made and grateful for the CEO's steady, respectful presence. Together, they had built a small network of care, support, and love that allowed the child to heal and flourish. The CEO, reflecting on the journey, realized that the relationship had been transformative. She had learned that small, thoughtful actions could create lasting impacts. She had discovered that leadership, in its most human form, involved nurturing, listening, and providing consistent support. She had experienced the rewards of emotional connection, trust, and empathy, lessons that went far beyond business or professional success. In the quiet moments, the CEO often thought about the child, the drawings, the letters, and the small gestures that had built trust and connection. She understood that life's most meaningful moments were not always measured by wealth, power, or recognition, but by the impact one had on another's heart. She realized that her presence, patience, and care had created a safe space for the child to heal, grow, and thrive. The story concluded with a sense of peace, understanding, and hope. The little girl had regained her joy, confidence, and ability to trust. The father had witnessed his daughter's healing, and the CEO had discovered a new dimension of fulfillment and human connection. Together, they had created an environment of love, trust, and stability. And in this quiet, beautiful journey, all three lives have been touched and transformed in ways that will remain with them forever.